Welcome to the first breakfast briefing of 2016. My name's Hunter Hill. I'm a member of the BGR Board of Directors and the chairman this year of the Breakfast Briefing Committee. We're delighted to welcome our BGR members here today, and if there are any elected officials, just want to thank you for being here. I don't have any here on the list that have joined us other than the mayor, but if you're here, thank you for being here. Also like to welcome all of our guests that are here this morning to hear the mayor speak. I'd like to remind everyone that BGR's mission is to inform public policy making and promote the effective use of public resources, all with the goal of improving government in the greater New Orleans area. To reach this goal, we publish influential, award-winning research and monitor 41 government entities across Orleans, Jefferson, and St. Tammany parishes. Breakfast briefings provide a critical opportunity to fulfill BGR's mission by allowing our citizens and policymakers to discuss issues that affect all of our lives. We hope you'll take advantage of our question and answer session following the mayor's talk today. If you would, just raise your hand and a member of the BGR staff will come around with a microphone, and if you would, identify yourself before asking the question. We also welcome ideas for future breakfast briefing topics. We'll have 3 or 4 more this year, and love to hear back from you on what you'd like the topics to be. There's some suggestion cards in the back on the way out. If you would pick one up, fill it out. We'd love to hear from you. The best way to stay on top of all of BGR events and research is to become a member. Financial support from a diverse membership is essential for BGR's work to promote good government. If you're not already a member, we hope you'll consider doing so today. Hopefully all of you found some information on joining our group and some information on membership in your chair, so please take a look at that. And now I'm going to turn things over to Dennis Waltering. I think you all know Dennis as WWL TV's former anchor. He continues to be active in the community, and he serves on the BGR board also. Thank you for all being. Thank you, all of you, for being here, and turn it over to Dennis.
Thanks a lot, Hunter. I'd like to take this opportunity to express our gratitude to Iberia Bank for its generous sponsorship of BGR's breakfast briefing series last year and again this year. This support allows us to make these events free to the public. Thanks so much. Mayor Mitch Landrieu now heads into the last 2 years of his administration. During the past 6 years, the city of New Orleans has seen major changes and confronted serious challenges, but big challenges still lie ahead. Here to discuss his priorities for the 2016 legislative session and for the remainder of his term is Mayor Mitch Landrieu. Mr. Mayor, thank you so much for joining us this morning. We appreciate it.
I like that. Thank you. That was short and quick. How y'all doing? Where are we? We're not in church? Everybody's so quiet. It's Mardi Gras. It's a happy time. It's nice to see you. Can everybody hear me in the room? First of all, thank you all for getting up on this terribly cold and wet morning for the city of New Orleans. Unfortunately, our firefighters right now are on the scene of a 6-alarm blaze. We have 91 fire personnel and 30 trucks out securing Canal Street. It's going to be okay. We don't have all of the facts yet, and when we do, we'll brief the public on what it is, but suffice it to say that travel around downtown for the next couple hours is going to be difficult, and we'll give everybody an update as we learn more. But I want to thank Chief McConnell and all of the firefighters for the great work that they have done and they continue to do, and I'll talk a little bit more about them later. I want to thank Celeste Coco Ewing for taking the time to meet with me and our team the other day with some other leaders from the BGR, Mark, Hardy, Kelly, Hunter, thank you very much, and Dennis, thank you for that very short and kind introduction. I really appreciate it. First of all, I want to start by saying, and it almost goes without saying, that I'm always happy to be here with the BGR. I have been a fellow partner in policy and ideas and reform since the day that I stepped into office in the legislature in 1988, and have carried the banner of reform for the most part of my political life. As a matter of fact, if there's one thing that can identify who I am and what I am, it's not right or left. It's find a way to make it better, make sure that resources get from where they're supposed to come from to where they're supposed to get in an honest, effective, efficient, competent manner, and make everything better for everybody else. And to do that in Louisiana, you got to fix things. You have to change the way they have worked in the past, because the way they worked in the past has not produced a great result for the city of New Orleans or the state of Louisiana. So from the, looking at Ron French, from the Roma Revolution all the way through today, I have always been about breaking the china and reorganizing it and try to get the mousetrap of government focused in a way that can produce a better result and stop Louisiana and New Orleans from being on the bottom of the list that they don't want to be on and the top of the list that we want to be on. And everything that I have done in my public life falls into that category. And so as it relates to my work as your mayor, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to serve you, we've been at this now for 6 years. And it's been a long 6 years, and it's been a tough 6 years. Sometimes it's easy for you to forget because you're worried about your day-to-day activities in your life, as you should be, where we were and how long a road we have traveled together. And I want you to know that for the next 831 days, until May 5th, 2018, which is our 300th anniversary for our city, we are going to do more, not less. We're going to go faster, not slower. We're going to keep the pedal to the metal, and we're going to build the city back, not the way she was, but the way it always should have been, or the way we dreamed that she should be. In 2010, when we came here, we found a mess. As the chief executive officer of this city, when choices came to my desk, the choices that I had every day, every choice, every decision, and there were a lot of them, no matter how many there were, the decision was between, Mr. Mayor, you have a bad choice and you have a worse choice. Which one would you like? That was the state of our affairs. Now, any business leader can tell you that if that's the measure of your choices every day, the outcome is not great. And you got to figure out a way to get out of that trap and get yourself into a place where somebody comes to you and says, I'd like to give you a good choice and a better choice. Which one would you like to make? Everything falls into that category. We had to do stuff like either fire police recruits or face bankruptcy. By 2018, as I said, my goal is to have the city in a posture so that the next mayor, the next city council, the next set of business and community leaders can choose between good and better, or better and best. That is the goal, and everything we should do fits into that. And that brings us to the point that what we're in here is a relay race. We've got to hand this off to the next generation, and our job is to leave it better than we found it. And so on the last leg that I have, which is 2 years and a couple of days, we're going to count every one of them. People tease me about counting the days. Every day that I get up, I have on the top of my briefing book how many days we've served and how many days we have left. And it's not because I'm in a hurry to leave. It's designed to tell my staff that count every day, count every minute, because once it leaves, you don't have another chance. All you have is time. You know it's constant. You know it is finite, so don't waste it. And try not to make mistakes along the way. And if you do, understand what they are, fix them, and do better the next time. But I want to just chit-chat with you about what we've done together in the last 6 years. It's been hard. We've got a huge amount together, and my bet is that you haven't really paid attention to all of it. But I want to run through a whole litany of things to do, because I want to give you confidence that your city is not only headed in the right direction, but it's steaming in the right direction. And we have a lot to be proud of. The first thing that we did in the city, and it's prescient right now because the state is about to go through the same exact thing, is we had to reform the budget process. The budget process was a complete mess. In order to do that, we did not take an ideological approach to doing this. We took a very practical approach. You've got to balance the budget, and you have to do it in a way that's going to allow the city to grow when the economy changes, because things will always get better. And so we took everything on the table approach. Bring me a solution that works. Don't worry about whether the Republicans or the Democrats or the left or the right or the people in Baton Rouge or Washington would do it. You bring me something that works for the city of New Orleans. And generally, the approach that we use is very commonsensical. The first thing we had to do was to cut spending. When we came into office, your city, which had at the time about a $484 million budget, had a $100 million hole in the budget. It's 3 times bigger functionally than the state has right now, as big as the state's budget crisis is. We had to cut almost 22% out of our budget. No other city in America has ever done that, and it was cold, hard cash. And everybody remembers, I hope, the agony and the pain that we had to go through by recreating every new contract, actually furloughing every city employee, stopping hiring police officers, completely shutting down parts of government in order for this government to kind of live for another day. It was a very, very painful process, but the approach was designed to make sure that we did it in a way so that when things got better, we weren't crippled, we could actually grow. And so we cut spending, we reorganized, we improved services, and then we invested the money in engines for growth. So in 2010, we had $100 million a year deficit. And then what happened in the next 6 years is this. We balanced our budget every year. Now, in your city, for the last 3 years, sales tax has grown somewhere between 5 and 10%. National level, 1%, state level, 1.2% in your city after 6 years. Our credit scores are up. We've been upgraded by all the bond rating agencies. The fire pension crisis, which has been a shadow over this city for the past 40 years, has been completely solved. We probably saved the future taxpayers of the city somewhere between $300 to $500 million and protected the pension benefits for the firefighters going forward, but it was something that had dogged 4 or 5 previous administrations. We did something that the BGR has always called on. People yelled and screamed, seemed like they could never get it done. We actually did it on the first day. We completely reformed through executive order the procurement process in this city, which in my opinion was the primary focus and engine for a lot of corrupt practices that had gone on before, where contracts were given out based on who you know, not what you know. And we have completely changed that, and that in many, many, many ways in the last 5 or 6 years has made all of the difference, because the decisions coming out of City Hall on public contracting and on properties that the city's own have been transparent, they've been open, and they have yielded spectacular results for you. We reformed the Surge and Water Board. With the help of the BGR and a lot of other folks, we took that organization, we ripped up its organizational structure, we redesigned the board, we put it back in play, and now, according to all measurements, the Surge and Water Board is moving itself out of an old lethargic organization into one that is doing a really good job. It takes time, because that is the organization that is responsible not only for giving you clean water, but in the next couple of years, as we reorganize and fix the streets, the pipes and the streets go together. And Cedric Grant, who is the executive director of the Surge and Water Board, who was the deputy mayor of Recovery and oversees the Department of Public Works for the first time in the history of the city, is forcing DPW, the Department of Public Works, and the Surge and Water Board to work together to fix that age-old problem of you ripped up the street this week and put it down, and now you got to come back and do it for the sewage system. That is going to get fixed. But let me be very clear with you about this. After Katrina, we started bleeding about 40% of our water out of our pipes. So in the city right now, under the ground that you walk on, you've got a decimated system. That system has to get fixed. Thank God that we were able to negotiate a $2 billion settlement with FEMA to start fixing all of that stuff. And that's really good, because that's $2 billion that doesn't have to come out of your pocket. Federal taxpayers are paying for that. But there's still a gap between what we need and what we have. And on top of that, in order for you to have pipes that work well, you're going to have to go through some agony. In other words, you're going to have to go through some sacrifice. So since people seem to have a really difficult time understanding what the word sacrifice means, because my mother continues to call me every day and yell at me about filling the pothole by her house and make sure that I get trucks out there really fast, but at the same time she doesn't want too many trucks on Napoleon Avenue, because when she tries to get to the doctor, there's too much construction going on. Y'all think about that for a minute, all of my friends in here that live uptown. Jefferson Avenue, Napoleon Avenue, right? All of those streets that are giving you headaches right now, that's called sacrifice for progress. That's what that is. I understand it, I get it. I drive on them every day, but if you want to not flood, you got to fix the streets. If you got to fix the streets, it takes you longer. Leave earlier. We also deal with it. We have to. It's hard. It's going to take a lot of time. We got a lot of stuff to do, and it's aggravating, but getting mad doesn't help. We also reformed the juvenile court system. When I came into office, I'm a practicing lawyer. I don't think I'll ever be able to go back and practice again, given all the fights that I'm having with the judges. But I came into office and I told you got to break the China. Too many judges in the city. We're spending too much money on things that we don't need. And so I took on the battle to reform the juvenile justice system as a lieutenant governor. And when I came into the city, we did that. And we actually succeeded in getting at least one of the juvenile court judgeships reduced, and there'll be a second one upon the retirement of the next judge. On top of that, for the first time in the history of the city, we built a wraparound, beautiful system of justice for the juvenile court system, which is on the other side of the Wisner Bridge, by the way, which is getting fixed at the moment. So you kind of have to go dogleg and you have to go around. I'll give you my number so that you can complain to me about that too. And of course, right now, what we're doing that's causing us a lot of challenges and difficulty is we're in the midst of the most comprehensive police consent decree reform that the United States of America has ever seen. You may recall that in 1996, we started moving in this direction. We made some progress, and then everybody left, and then the department went back to what it was before. The Department of Justice came here in 2010 when I was here, and we together have been completely restructuring how that department works. Now, this is not just a theoretical problem. This is a financial issue, it's a management issue, it's a hiring issue, it's a supervisory issue, it's all of those things wrapped up in one. And the federal government, when they get their claws around you about consent decrees, and we have had 5 of them that I have had to manage our way through, not only can make you do something, but they also can make you pay for it. And right now, we are spending about $55 to $60 million aside from the day-to-day expenses of the police department into better hiring practices, fixing all of the things that we do in the police department, and then making sure that the police actually get on the ground. Now, this is not specifically to pay for new police. This is to make sure that the police you have do the job that they need to do, which, as you know, every day gets more complicated for police officers because we're asking more of them in terms of where to be and how to get there and how quick, and we're also demanding that they act in a way that creates a constitutional policing system where there is a partnership between the police department and the community. A very, very, very difficult thing to do at a time in the United States of America where we're having hiccups not only on national security and homeland security, but public safety as well. And that matter, in large measure, is being run out of the mayor's office, but it has to be run in concert with the federal district court. And there are some instances where federal judges, who can seize city property, by the way, can tell you what to do, tell me what to do with your money. And in instances, that gets very difficult. But we're working through that. We reformed the entire Public Belt Railroad system. You may recall that when we came into office, there was a dust-up over there. We had to recreate that board. We had to refocus that energy. We now have a great board in place. It's moving in the right direction. When I came in, the aviation board was a mess. We reappointed that board. We restructured that. Not only is the airport moving in the right direction, but for the first time in 30 years, I'm happy to report to you, after lots of folks have tried it, we actually broke ground on your new airport, which is going to be finished in 2018. It's going to have 32 new gates. It's a $1 billion investment. You are going to have a state-of-the-art facility to fly in and out of in the city of New Orleans. We also have completely redone, in terms of public-private partnership, the New Orleans Recreation Department, which you may recall was flat when we got here. We've now tripled the budget. We've increased by, hundredfold the number of people that actually use North facilities. I challenge each and every one of you that work out at Tulane or work out at Loyola or go out to Elmwood or work out at the Hilton, go check out some of the new rec centers in the city of New Orleans. When you're driving down Broad Street, just stop before you go over the Broad Overpass and jump off and go see the new Rosenwald Center. You're going to see a state-of-the-art, first-class recreation facility for the citizens of New Orleans. If you happen to find yourself in the lower Ninth Ward this afternoon when you're going to and from work, I'm just kidding, you guys. But you should take time to go to the lower Ninth Ward when you get a chance. And look at the new, beautiful $23 million Sanchez Center that we have, or the new one that we have on Rampart Street. 13 of the new pools that we have. We had 7,000 kids that went to our NORD camps last year, and the rec department is getting back to like it was when we were kids. It was a wonderful experience for all of us, and the rec centers and the libraries, by the way, which we have opened a huge number of. And by the way, you have 36 new schools. I really want to ask everybody in this city to get off your main track and your pathway of getting to work and getting to from work and ride around the city and see the major investments that have been made that will make your eyes open in a very bright way. You now have 36 new state-of-the-art schools that are creating the kinds of products that we've never seen in the history of the city of New Orleans, where graduation rates are up, dropout rates are down, the achievement gap is closing between kids in the city and kids outside of the city. You have a bunch of brand new libraries that people have been using as tech centers and knowledge-based centers and job-based centers all over the city of New Orleans. And you have all of the things that I talked about earlier. You have a new private-public partnership with the New Orleans Business Alliance. Quentin Messer, our executive director, is here in partnership with GEO Inc., in partnership with the state of Louisiana. We are constantly in the business of going out and either creating new jobs or encouraging new jobs to come into the city of New Orleans. GE just being one of the greatest achievements that we have, where we now have more than 100 high-paying, I mean more than $100,000 jobs in the middle of the CBD, because GE, in a national competition, bet on the city of New Orleans. They didn't give us anything, we won it. Just like 2 days ago, we won $141 million. This is no inconsequential matter to help rebuild parts of Gentilly. That was a national competition. We competed against every city in America. And guess who got the most money in the United States of America? The state of Louisiana and the city of New Orleans. By far outpaced New York, New Jersey, every place else that competed against us. The message is this, that people across America are beginning to see in New Orleans a city that's standing itself up and is doing things that nobody else has ever done in a shorter period of time. Now, I know that you're living through it, and you may not see it all, but if you take a minute to step back and think about where we were at any point in your life in the city of New Orleans, and think about where we are now, you should feel very optimistic and hopeful about the future direction of the city, because this city today, right now, is a fundamentally different city than it was 6 years ago in all of its institutions and all of its structures. And the reason that is important to acknowledge is because if you have strong structures, if you have strong foundations, then what you can do with that is grow it bigger, better, faster, and more. And that really has been our goal from the beginning. But it's not a fait accompli, and it won't stay that way if you don't continue to put your shoulder to the wheel and make sure that we make good decisions with what we have and put ourselves, again, think about this, in a position where you actually have a choice between good and you have better. But there are a lot of headwinds out there because we don't live in a vacuum. We live in a city in the United States of America, right? We are a local government in partnership with the state government and the federal government, and everybody knows that if your partners are weak or they don't show up or somebody that you work with doesn't do their job and you've got to do their job for them, either something doesn't get done or things don't work out exactly the way they're supposed to. And so one of the ways that we have been so successful, besides hiring an unbelievably experienced, competent team, many of them who are here today that have made a great sacrifice on your behalf, is to make sure that we get from our partners what they need and make sure what we need and make sure that we do what we're supposed to so that we can leverage the few assets that we have. Everything that we have done in this city that has been a success, everything, will have in the mix of people that helped a partnership between the federal, state, and local authorities, vertically and horizontally. So on the federal level, we don't just work with one department. We try to work with all of the people that have stuff. On the state level, on the local level, and then we make sure that we talk to each other, communicate all the time. On top of that, we always have private sector partners. We always have the faith-based community. We always have not-for-profits. This is not a matter of ideology. I didn't just wake up one day and say, oh, you know, it's my philosophy that we all ought to sing Kumbaya around the fire and that nobody can do anything unless everybody's there. That's not how that happened. How it happened was, we're a small city. We're really under it. We need to get out of it. I need as many friends as I can find, and I got to go find people that either should help me, can help me, or want to help me, and then I have to create an environment where everybody can push and focus in the same direction. And guess what? When you do that and you invite people in and they show up, you can make music. You can make magic. I call that facilitate, link, and leverage. I use the power of the mayor's office to organize people that have expressed a common interest. I introduce them to each other, and then we think about ways how to leverage the few assets that we have, and guess what? It creates a lot of great stuff. And that's the philosophy that we have used. And so it's really a practical approach to governing. And so now as we move into the environment that we're in, I have a president of the United States that I get along with really, really well. I also got along with President Bush. It doesn't really matter to me from day to day, practical matters. Who's in that office? As long as the city of New Orleans gets a response from the executive branch of government and allows us to run wide and deep about what the federal government can do or should do for us. And so we're in Washington all of the time, talking to the secretaries of whatever president they work for to make sure that Louisiana is in the mix. And we have in the city of New Orleans gotten a huge amount of help from the federal government in the last 6 years. If we wouldn't have gotten that help, I dare say the city would not be standing today. And so I am very thankful. I am very thankful for every dollar that we have gotten, and I will continue to talk to our congressional delegation, our senators, and our congressmen to help us make sure we do that. But here's the thing. You have to do that on the state level, too. When the state has been emasculated, when it's weak, when it's not pulling its weight, all of a sudden, all of what they're not doing falls to you to do. Now, this is not just my problem. I'm the one that's got to try to figure out how to make the mousetrap work. Essentially, though, it falls on you, the taxpayer, because you either feel it in terms of services that are not being provided or more taxes that you have to pay to fill the gap. I see Derwin Bunton standing right in the back. Derwin, raise your hand. Derwin runs the Indigent Defender Office. He's now telling people that he doesn't have enough lawyers to defend people, and we're in a fight about whether it's the state's obligation or the city's obligation. It's the state's. So are the lights on that bridge over there. So are a whole bunch of money that's supposed to come through the Medicaid program for paratransit. So are a bunch of other stuff. And when the state doesn't have any money, when they're broke, when they don't manage well, they basically say, city, you're on your own. You got to do all that stuff. And essentially what that means, whether it's funding for senior centers, whether it's the Indigent Defender's Office, whether it's the lights on the bridge, whether it's $9 million in paratransit, where the rubber meets the road is in the city council chamber, when your city council, being fiscally responsible and thoughtful, has a certain amount of dollars, we have to balance the budget, and then it's a zero-sum game. Somebody gets and somebody doesn't get. Or everybody gets less, somebody gets more. That's how that works out. And essentially, when it gets down to the ground where you live on your street, it means a pothole doesn't get filled, or a red light doesn't get fixed, or a street doesn't get redone, or a police officer doesn't show up. That is why I tell people that mayors and cities are the tip of the spear. We're the ones who have to get this figured out. So it's to our benefit to make sure that our partners are healthy. They got to be healthy first in order for them to be able to say yes to what we're asking them for. And so what is right before us now, besides all the stuff that we're doing in the city that I'll talk about in a bit, is what's going to happen on the state level. When Governor Jindal took office, he was left with a fairly substantial surplus. Their philosophy of government, for whatever reason, was never to raise a tax, okay? Now, you can have that philosophy if you want, but if you're gonna do that, you've gotta cut the government so that the amount of money that you have coming in measures up so that you balance the budget. You really can't be both at the same time, because if you're both at the same time, this is what happens. If you got a little change in your pocket because somebody left you a lot of money, or you got a little change in your pocket because you squirreled away a bunch of stuff, all right? You can put off for a while, right, making very difficult cuts, but you can't put it off forever because the money can only come from one place. It can come from revenue that's coming in from a bunch of different sources, or it can come out of your trust funds. We had spent a lot of time, Dr. French, when we got into a bunch of us young folks in 1988, and we created a revenue structure in this city, in the state of Louisiana, that created the revenue estimating conference so we knew exactly how much money was coming in. We created trust funds so that any money that came in from the oil and gas industry would go in it that we would have for a rainy day. We created the AG fund. We created a bucket load of stuff. And when it was left 8 years ago, the state was financially pretty healthy. But the governor and the legislature made some catastrophically bad decisions. They never raised revenue to meet their expenses, or they never cut their expenses to raise their revenue. And because they would not make hard decisions, what they did was they robbed Peter to pay Paul, and they took money out of every trust fund, and bled the entire state. So now the state of Louisiana, your state, is back in a fiscally distressing situation like it was in the day we stepped into office in 1988, when the state of Louisiana could not meet its payroll the next week. And you may recall we had to create a single taxing district in the state, increase the sales tax for a penny, raise $1 billion, and then spend the next 4 or 5 years getting out of trouble. And where the state is right now, this state right now, is it's got to get out of trouble. It's got to get out of fiscal trouble. And again, it's going to require hard choices. For those of you that remember back then, the mantra was fiscal reform. You got to change the taxing structure. You got to do that, right? But then you have to change your spending behavior. Then you have to reorganize the government. Then you have to invest the money in things that matter. There is no city in America, there is no state in America that can compete at all if you're not healthy and you're not smart. I mean, you just can't do it. Right now, we're in an international competition with China, with India, with Great Britain, much less with Mississippi, Alabama, New York, Chicago, San Francisco, San Diego. And if you don't have the resources to build human capital, and human capital surrounds being healthy so that you can show up for work, and being smart, having schools that teach you well, early childhood education, primary and secondary education, higher education, guess what? You can't compete. You just can't compete. And it takes resources to get that done and smart management. The state of Louisiana, right now, this governor and this legislature probably have the toughest job that most governors have seen in the last 40 years. And what we need to do is to be present and to be thoughtful on the big structural things, right? Because my advice to them would be the advice that I gave to myself. Go through the agony and the pain of doing the hard thing and the right thing, and take the long view and suffer through the early pain that you have to go through. But don't make decisions today that are going to make fixing the big problem later more difficult. And so the legislature is going to have to go into special session. They are then going to go into regular session. I predict that they will go into special session again, and then they will go into special session again. I think they'll be in session for the most part of the rest of the year in order to get us from falling off a financial cliff and then turning ourselves around. Now, once they do that and they open up that can of worms, everybody in here has got some kind of special interest. Somebody works for the banking industry, somebody works for the housing industry, somebody works for the senior citizens, somebody works for the indigent defenders, somebody works for somebody that wants something. But generally, in Louisiana, now, I'm a little tongue-in-cheek here this morning. You heard the old saying in Louisiana, if you didn't get something for nothing, you didn't get your fair share. Y'all want me to say that again? You know it's true. You like that free parking, right? Nobody likes getting a ticket. Nobody likes paying anything. Everybody wants everything. That's the truth about us. I guess it's true about everybody all over the place. That's not what works. That's not what we preach to our kids about personal responsibility. Everybody showing up, helping somebody else out, everybody paying, everybody taking responsibility, everybody working hard, self-sacrifice, getting up early, staying up late. Sounds like Utah. They don't have king cakes. They don't take 3 weeks off of Mardi Gras. It's a wonderful thing, and it's really great. But what I'm telling everybody is what I've told everybody before. We got to kind of put our shoulder to the wheel and quit thinking about what everybody else is going to get and what we can give. That's my general advice to everybody. And when you get in the weeds, the word sacrifice means it hurts. It costs more, it takes longer, you do with less. That's what sacrifice means. People ask me all the time when I go out around the country, do you need a Katrina to do what New Orleans did? Now, I would never wish Katrina on anybody, and I would say that's insane. Don't even ask that question. What they're trying to get to is, do you need a near-death experience in your life to wake yourself up so that you can focus on the things that really matter in your life? And can you, if you're not under threat of existence, actually rediscipline yourself into doing things that actually produce a better result than what you have for the past 40 years? I'll leave that for everybody here. I think that the city of New Orleans, for whatever reason, has gone through an incredible amount of agony and pain. And I think the people of the city of New Orleans have certainly given me and the city council the freedom to make really, really hard decisions. And making those hard decisions and gone through that pain, gone through that agony, making the right decisions that cost us more, takes us more time, have allowed us to put ourselves in a position where we really have a chance now to be the great American city that all of us always dreamed that we can be. And it's really important that we stay focused on those big things. So we got a couple of things going on. I talked to you a little bit about the airport. You have a brand new airport. That's an amazing thing. I think I've run into some people who think that was just like a fait accompli. I want to remind you, how long y'all been talking about building a new airport in the city of New Orleans? Like a long time. right? Well, guess what? You're finally going to have one, and it didn't happen by accident. We have now more people coming into the city of New Orleans than have ever come into the city of New Orleans. Now, after Katrina, nobody thought that that would be possible. We have 5 new airlines that have direct flights to the city of New Orleans. And as I told you, I know you don't believe this because nobody believes anything that I say until I prove it to you, that it's going to be built by 2018. And guess what else is going to get built? The World Trade Center. That building right down there that's been sitting dormant. You walk by it all the time. Everybody might have gone and danced upstairs, you know, a couple of times and gone to a couple of meetings when we had our National Council of Court Committee. That building has lain dormant for what, 20 years, 30 years? We tried and tried and tried. Now, as a result of an open, transparent procurement process, you have some of the wealthiest people in the world that actually came into your city and said, I care about you, but I care about myself more. I can make money in your city. I can make money in your city. And I can make more money in your city than I can in any other city in America, which is why I'm going to put my capital on the river in the city of New Orleans. When's the last time somebody told y'all that? Do you remember? I mean, generally, we got to go chase people and beg them to come to this city. But some of the wealthiest developers in the world came and said, this real estate market is hotter. They could have gone to New York. They could have gone to Philadelphia. They could have gone to Los Angeles. They could have planted their money anywhere in the world that they wanted to. And those folks came here because they trusted in your government. They trusted in your government. Now, that's something interesting that we should get used to around here. You imagine trusting in your government? Well, they did it. And they bet their dollars on it. And the World Trade Center is, as soon as they get out of that lawsuit that they're in, and I predicted that'll be very soon, they're going to renovate that building, and it's going to be one of the nicest developments. It's going to create tons of jobs. The airport construction is going to create 13,000 jobs in the city of New Orleans. And the also thing that we're going to do is we're going to start building the sewer system in the city. Now, I'm just warning you right now, this is going to hurt. Okay? It's going to hurt. Now, we can either fix it or we cannot fix it. The reason you want to fix it is because it's bleeding 40% of your water. How many people could, you know, be in the business of manufacturing and selling bread and giving away 40% of the loaf that you make? Go ask Leidenheimers if they'll cut that, or king cake. Let's just say we were making king cake. How many of you want to give away 40% of your king cake before you start eating it? You don't want to do that. You get the point, right? You got to fix it. And by the way, it is the result, forgive me for being so hard this morning, it isn't the result of the people of New Orleans putting off for another day a hard decision and deferring so people in the future could handle it. But guess what? When you do that, it costs a lot more and it takes a lot longer. And so one of the things we had to do is go out to the public and say, listen, you've got to figure out that the rates that we're paying for water have got to be consistent with the cost of providing the water. That's a fairly fiscally responsible position to take. It's actually very conservative. But what had happened in this city over a long period of time is that nobody wanted to raise the rates for paying water. Now, everybody knows this in business. The cost of doing business goes up. The cost of goods goes up. The cost of services goes up. And if the amount of revenue that you have coming in doesn't match with that, you get a deficit and somebody subsidizes it. And what you had in the Surge and Water Board when I got here was the people of the city of New Orleans subsidizing everybody else to the tune of $800,000 a month because the water rates weren't consistent with the cost. And we had to fix that, which we did. And then we got the $2 billion from the federal government, and now we're going to have to start the work. And I know everybody wants us to start it until it starts on your street, right? And then it gets to be inconvenient. Poor Eric Paulson lives around the corner. You know Eric, don't you? Yeah. Lives around the corner from my house and he's suffered more than any New Orleanian. He's got a fence in front of his house because the work on Jefferson Avenue has been completely difficult, and I do understand it. And of course, I'm joking just a bit because it is hard. But if you want to get to a new place, you've got to make the sacrifice. That mentality is really the thing that I'm talking about in the city of New Orleans as we go forward. And so I want to bring you to the last things that I want to talk to you about this morning. First of all, when we got here, we were going in the wrong direction. We've now turned it around. You are a fundamentally different city today than you are structurally from a government perspective. All of the reforms, almost all of them that the BGR has championed have actually been put in place. I'm not saying that y'all don't have other suggestions, but the gravamen and the big building blocks that the BGR said needed to be put in place so that this city could be governed well are now in place. They need to stay in place. They need to be maintained in place, and then where we see holes in them, they need to be reformed. I'll make one point about that, and then I'll move on to my last 2 points. Ron, when Buddy Roma wanted to reform the charity hospital system. Me, Gary Foster, a bunch of other folks got together. We created something called the Louisiana Healthcare Authority, as you may recall. We wanted to take the charity hospital system out of being a centrally run system, create a public-private partnership, and we actually designed something called the Healthcare Authority. You may recall that Governor Romer did not get reelected. And before he left office, he forgot to appoint the people to the Louisiana Healthcare Authority. It was a really well-designed system. It was a reform system. It matters. But when Governor Edwards came in office, he had a different idea about how to run the charity hospital system. He left the Louisiana Healthcare Authority reform in place, but he populated it with people that had a different idea. And I learned from that experience that it wasn't the structure of the system alone that mattered. It was the people who were there that were making the decisions. And of course, that's something only the democratic process can take care of. Hiring people, electing people that are honest, that are smart, that work hard, that do the right thing, that want to make the right decisions is by far the most important thing. Systems are important too, but you have to have both of them in order for the city to succeed. Secondly, I would say this, that every major city that has turned itself around, everyone, without fail, and everyone that has failed, all right, has done the exact opposite. But everyone that has succeeded has had a succession of good leadership, not just in the political elected jobs, but in the business community as well, and had a trajectory of 10, 15, 20, 30 years of good work before they ascended to where they are today. New York is example number one. In 1976, the city of New York was bankrupt. It was done. There was this big fight about whether the United States government was going to bail New York out, and you know the government of the United States bailed the city of New York out. Now, I love New York City, and they always profess to be the biggest and the best, and you know today they are. But in 1976, they were on their back. They were on their back. And it has taken them a good number of 20, 30 years to get out of it. You will see the same thing with Detroit. Detroit will come back. Detroit is going to be fine. Mayor Duggan is doing a great job. He's got great business leaders, but it's going to take 15 or 20 years. And guess what? In your city, it's going to take that much time too. We almost ran Don Powell out of this city. Y'all remember Don Powell? He was the czar that President Bush put in place when they said, how long is it going to take? He had the audacity to say that it was going to take 20 years. We almost ran him out of here on a rail because we didn't want to hear the truth. We didn't want to face the reality. We didn't want to have to understand how really hard it was going to be and how deep the problems really were. And so as proud as I am of the things that we have done in the city, you have got some cataclysmically tough challenges that we as a community have to face. In a city that's got 52% of African American men not working, that's really, really hard. Why aren't they working? Where should they be working? How is the job training programs that we have? What's the business community doing to deal with this? Who even are they? Where are they? How do we figure out how they got there? How are we going to rebuild the education system so that we don't have that problem going into the future, so that we stop the pipeline of creating people that are not going to work? That is a huge issue that we have to work through in the city. That issue, along with many others, the level of poverty in the city, the dysfunction that we have produces an environment where crime ferments. You can hire as many police officers in the world as you want. And by the way, we need a lot more, right? But you can't just police your way out of the problems that are in the city of New Orleans in areas that ferment violence. We have to think about that. Early childhood education is really, really important. 0 to 3 brain development, right? Job growth is important, but actually having the institutions that actually train individuals is important too. So you got to be thinking about those things. It goes into the issue of race relations in this city. You always have to think about that. This city is 64% African American, 64%, right? And by the way, diversity is a strength in America, not a weakness. And so everybody ought to be thinking about the relationships that they have, who they're working with, who's populating our offices, who's populating our playgrounds, whether or not we know each other, whether we can share each other, what the trust is between and amongst the community. That will always be a problem in this country unless we confront it and we deal with it and we work through it. It's not going to take care of itself. I know you think it is because our children are much better at it than we are. They are. They're a lot better at it than we are. But it requires a little bit of help, and it requires everybody being invested in that problem. And then as it gets to the immediate issues of the day as it relates to the city, the governor and I have been in communication with each other on a regular basis. We are going to make sure that the city of New Orleans has what it needs, and the state has promised to do its part. I'm glad he's promising that, and I take him at his word, but he is not in complete control. over the finances of the state of Louisiana. And so we're going to have to, all of us, make sure that in Baton Rouge, when they go into special session and they go into all the things that they do, that we're up there and we make sure that the things that the city of New Orleans needs in terms of infrastructure finances are in place. But I will end with 2 points. I told you that I did not take an ideological approach to governing the city, that my mantra was either to find a way or to make one, that we cut, we reorganized, we completely reformed, we reset, and then the savings we invested, and then and only then did we go to the taxpayers and said, I need more. I told you about the consent decrees, 5 of them, and how much money the federal judges made us take from your pot of money and put it over there. What that did essentially was leave a hole in our budget and make it impossible for a year and a half or 2 years to hire police officers. And everybody in this city now, everybody, says to me, I want more police officers. And I said, I do too, and we have to pay for it. And I want you to be fiscally responsible with the firefighters' pension and stop bleeding our surpluses so that we can have money to pay for the things that we really need. And I said, I do too. And so after going to Baton Rouge on 2 or 3 separate occasions, asking for a whole bunch of ways to raise revenues, to make sure the tourists pay for it, to try to find a way to get rid of exemptions, to exhaust every possibility that existed out there, we are now at the point where the citizens of New Orleans are going to have to step up and pay for the things that you say that you need. There are 2 things that we are asking the public for. Now remember, this went to the legislature. It's passed statewide. It's passed citywide already. It came to the city council. It passed the city council. We are asking the people of the city to pay more in property taxes so that we can hire 400 new police officers to get us from 1,200 to 1,600. I could spend a long time explaining to you why it's essential that we do it, but I'll say it very shortly. National security, that would be terrorism. Homeland security, the marriage between terrorism abroad and at home. Public safety have now merged into one thing that are being fought by one team of individuals, and it is mostly local police departments, and it is your police department. Just yesterday, we had a police officer shot that was part of a unit of New Orleans police officers, Jefferson Parish police officers, St. Bernard police officers, ATF, DEA, right, FBI, U.S. Marshals. Those are tag teams that we have on the streets every day, making sure that we make the streets safe, and unfortunately, this deputy got shot. Keep him in your prayers, but he is very, very, very severely wounded. We do not have the tools on the streets of America, and every mayor in America agrees with what I'm about to say, to shoulder the responsibility that has been given to us as a result of San Bernardino, Boston, Paris. Think about what's happening out there. We need more resources on the streets. We need more people who are better hired, better trained, and police in a way that's consistent, but the resources are necessary. And you cannot tell me with a straight face, you just can't, I do not accept it, that you want more police officers in this city, but you're not willing to pay for it. If you want it, we got to pay for it because nobody else is coming. I've done everything that I can as your mayor, and I have generated huge amounts of federal funds to support the things that we needed, and I gave you a long list of them, but at the end of the day, we are ultimately responsible for paying for the things that we say that we need, and that's part A. Part B are the firefighters. $2 million to pay for the firefighters' pension lawsuit that has been hanging over this city. That was not my fight. I inherited that fight. And guess what? It wasn't the last mayor's fight, and it wasn't the last mayor's fight. It was the city's fight. When the firefighters sued the city, they sued you. This is all of us. It is the city's debt to pay back to the firefighters what we thought what we owed them, and I fought very hard because I wanted a fair deal. And I told the firefighters, as much as we love them, it's not fair for you to go to ask the taxpayers for money if you have a pension system that's not fair. Every citizen in New Orleans wants to support the retirement of firefighters, but your firefighter system can't be any different from the one at Iberia Bank, and it can't be any different from over here, and you've got a structure. And you know what? They agreed. They went through some substantial pain and cut back their pension system, and now as the mayor, I can come recommend to you that that system is solvent, it's sound, but you got to pay the bill. And the bill is on the ballot. Now, and I'll end with this and take questions. The BGR did what I thought was a spectacular report, spectacular. I thought your analysis of the money coming into the city and the money going out of the system is exactly right. It's exactly the same in the city. And over years, when nobody's paying attention to that, you can have money going to places where you never expected it to be. It happens that way because the school system is in dire straits. So you just quickly go take a hotel motel tax, you put it over there and you stand it up. But over time, it gets all out of balance and it gets all out of whack, and then it doesn't make any sense. All this hotel motel tax that comes through the city, your city only gets 2 pennies of it. There are lots of assets in this city that we don't get the benefit out of because other folks over the years have taken it away, and we need a massive review of all of those to redirect the resources that we already have to things that might be the priorities of the citizens today. All right, and so I completely agree with you and want to do that. Here's the difference that we have right now, and I want to resolve. I'm asking you today to resolve this difference in the favor of the city. You can say, well, why should we go pay more when what we're doing right now is not going exactly where it's supposed to be going? And Mr. Mayor, how do you resolve that conflict? I will say this: my job is to fix the plane while I'm flying it. I don't have the freedom to land the plane and to fix it, and to take a year to fix it, and then to put it back up in the air. Both of these things have to be done at the same time. Even if everything in the BGR report was done, my sense in your city, as your CEO for the past 6 years, is that the city of New Orleans is still about $150 million in cash short of what it needs to provide to you what it is that you say you need. And so we don't have to wait. We have to actually do both of these things. We have to pass both of these millages, make sure they get where they're supposed to be going, hire the police officers, and start the process of reorganizing where those revenues are coming from and where they're supposed to go. That is probably a 2 or a 3 year process that's going to require a lot of pushing and shoving between the city council, the state legislature, and everybody knows that that's not something that can be done sooner. But we cannot wait to make sure that we hire as many police officers as we need, make sure that we have the firefighters that we need so that we can provide the safety and security that the events of this morning and yesterday speak for themselves about. And so I'm really asking this organization to be a full supporter of those millage increases that we have. We've managed money really, really well. We have done everything that we've said we're going to do and more. And it's important now that we stand shoulder to shoulder and make the city safe and secure. Thank you very much. If I have any time left, I'll be happy to.
Thank you very much, Mayor. We appreciate it. In keeping with BGR tradition, we will take a few questions from the audience. Raise your hand if you have a question. Stay in your seat. A microphone will be passed to you. Mr. Mayor, you referenced what I was going to ask you about at the very end. You mentioned that some basic city services, the revenue for basic city services is stretched to the breaking point. The BGR analysis revealed that some entities that benefit from dedicated taxes are flush. The Exhibition Hall Authority, for example, has a $200 million surplus. What is being done right now to analyze and redeploy that funding?
He was talking about the convention center. The convention center, for the people of New Orleans, the Superdome is a state building, owned, operated, run. All revenue that goes in and goes out goes to the state. They have, when they made the deal with the Saints, they gave tax breaks to the Saints so that when you buy a hot dog in the Superdome or you buy a Coke, no tax is applied to it, and none of that comes to the city of New Orleans to pay for the police that have to man that building. Same thing is true of the convention center. The same thing is true of Harrah's. Harrah's bleeds off a lot of money. 90% of the money that's taxes that come out of the building actually go to the state. And so I have made the argument, and I think it's a good argument, that listen, we're happy to have all of those state entities in the city. We are a partner with the state in providing tourism and about $500 million, but you've got to reinvest in the city of New Orleans. Now, you can either do that out of the general fund and give us money so that we can hire more police officers, or you can send state police here, or there's lots of other stuff that you can do, or you can give us the revenue stream and let us do it. The issue that you raised is about a hotel motel tax penny. There was one of them that we all voted on so that we could build the 4th phase of the convention center when it was really needed. Evidently, the market went down, didn't really need it, and this huge surplus built up. So you have a surplus sitting over there. We would argue that that hotel motel tax penny should come back to the city of New Orleans so that we can do the things that we need, mainly public safety. State says no. So we're in a battle about that. In the meantime, I'll say, well, that's fine. If you're not going to give the penny back, make sure you use that money, right, on things the city thinks are important. So we're in the process right now of negotiating with the convention center because they do want to do an expansion. It's important to do that, to make sure that some of that money is spent on infrastructure in and around to actually completely redo Convention Center Boulevard. Behind the World Trade Center is Spanish Plaza, to completely redo that area and to make sure that they invest the money in the city. And no matter what, not take that money and send it to North Louisiana, which is what Governor Jindal wanted to do. Now, that's in the short term. In the long term, we're going to be on the same page that that penny needs to come back to the city of New Orleans. Now, you have some other things that are going on. The clerk of court, for some reason, has a surplus. The assessor has a surplus. All of these things you got to go back in and look at. Now, I'm not looking to starve anybody. Everybody needs what they need to do the job that the public says. But if it's gotten out of balance, right, and everybody says, well, streets are really my thing right now, you know, not something else, then I think it's worth a look. And the only way you can do that is some kind of mini constitutional convention. We're actually looking at this legally now because it requires mostly action in the state legislature. It's my thought, just from having been up there for 16 years, they're not gonna have the ability to pay attention to that in the next 6 months. They have to get their fiscal house in order. The state's fiscal house is on fire. They got to put that fire out. And then I think we can get into some breathing room where we create an environment like we did back in 1988, where the state's really got to think about long-term restructuring. When that happens, I think we have to be at the table fighting really, really hard and having all the facts about what needs to be changed.
All right. Any questions?
Yeah. Good morning. Well, thank you for that. It's a good question. I can repeat the question. She said that, Mayor, you said that you wanted to raise property taxes and that everybody had to make sacrifice. In the city of New Orleans, we have a housing shortage. Rents have gone up. People are having a hard time finding space. If the city's got a role to play, what would you speak about who's going to pay and who's not going to pay, and what's your approach to that? Is that fair? Nod your head so they know I said it was okay. Thank you very much. Donald Trump was yelling at somebody yesterday about misstating their question. I didn't want you to yell at me about that. Did y'all see that? See what you got coming? You better ask a good question. I would generally say this, that, and I want to put this in context. The kinds of problems that cities face are never ending. Sometimes you have a problem of people leaving the city and not having people and having a housing market that's a glut, which pushes prices down. All right, that's a problem that you have to deal with. And then sometimes you have a problem with a lot of people moving into the city, pushing people out, housing values go up, and then what do you do? Remember that, what I said about having decisions between bad and worse and good and better? One of the challenges that we have now is so many people are moving into the city, and so many people are repopulating neighborhoods that didn't have. You have now the issue of gentrification. You have the issue of quality housing, affordable housing, and then enough of housing. In the city of New Orleans, you're right, we do have a role. We have a couple of different roles. First, Hanno, which was in receivership, that's now out of receivership, has a board that's appointed by the mayor, and their job is to oversee and manage all of the big four. Now, I don't think there are many people that would quarrel with this notion. Where the housing developments used to be and what has replaced them, it's far better today than it was before. You remember everybody getting really anxious and upset about changing the past? It was like that. That was our history. Why you want to change our history? People have been living there forever. Why would you change something that is for something that you think that should be better? We went through that big fight. And if you now go to Harmony Oaks, you go out to where the St. Bernard Housing Project used to be, any place out there, what you see is much, much better physical structure, much, much better spiritual structure, and an organizational structure that is providing, in my opinion, better and as affordable housing as that. So that's the Hanno piece. On the housing side, now, this goes to the issue of your partners not showing up. There are not many people that are old enough to remember Richard Nixon in here, are there? Nick, you remember Richard Nixon? This is a crazy story, but when Nixon was in office, Nixon was the first modern president who happened, was a Republican at the time, that really understood that the federal government, the state, and the city governments were partners in providing services. And so he created something called National Revenue Sharing, Community Development Block Grants, the thing that later became the COPS program. And essentially what this was a recognition that there are some cities that are wealthier than others. And New York can always take care of itself, and Los Angeles can, but cities like New Orleans, cities like San Francisco, all the cities in between needed cushions. And so they created these block grants that they sent down to the cities so that the mayor of the city of New Orleans did not have to tax or did not have to raise rents. That used to be a bucket load of money. In today's dollars, my father, who likes to remind me about how things used to be, I'll let that sit out there for a little while. He tells me that in today's dollars, that would be about $100 million, that the federal government would write the city a $100 million check to do things like community policing, housing, et cetera, et cetera. In today's terms, those are called community development block grants. That pot of money, so let me put that there, and then the COPS program. Remember I said we needed to hire more police? In 1996, the federal government gave this city $7 million a year to hire 400 police officers. Those monies, that pot of money has been cut by 88 to 90% because your federal government, run by whoever it's been run by over the past 15 to 20 years, has said what governs locally governs best and local governments are on their own. So what has that done, right? Put a huge amount of pressure on city councils, and our city council feels this pressure so that when we're sitting at the city council and Derwin's asking me for more money, and you're asking me for more money, and the senior citizens are asking me for more money, and the people that want the tax breaks, and everybody in here that wants to develop property, and you go to the IDB board and say, don't worry about it, it's funny money, just give me a tax breaks for 10 years, and then you push a hole into the budget. All of those things force us then to have less money to do the things that you say that we need. On top of that, what you see happening in the city is people beginning to populate neighborhoods they didn't populate. Now, for all the folks that live uptown in Mid-City, you know what this looks like. If you live in Faubourg, Marigny, or the Bywater, you know what this looks like. And so one of the challenges that we have continually have to work with is finding the resources necessary to subsidize, right, housing for individuals that don't have it. So the city of New Orleans has been working on this. Ellen Lee, I don't know if she's here. We have a 10-year housing plan. We have made great strides in homelessness. I know you've seen in the paper this morning, we're doing our point-in-time surveys. After Katrina, we had 13,000 homeless people. Now we have 1,700. We continue to work those numbers down. That kind of strain is going to be with us. But it is absolutely true that every time you raise a tax, somebody is going to pay. And the argument, I guess, is who's going to pay, how much are they going to pay, and is it fair? And do you have that many choices? Which gets me back to, again, don't want to be too theoretical to you guys. You always want to try to get yourself into a place where your decisions are for better and for best. For example, the governor right now has proposed increasing the sales tax. Right now, it's my opinion that the state needs more money now. And whatever they have to do to get more resources, so they don't have to shut down universities, invest in mental health, Janet, doing those, they need to do. And we don't really have the time. We don't really have the time to get into a philosophical discussion, although I'm sure that we will, about whether sales tax is a better tax than an income tax or an income tax is better. You want to get into a space where you can actually have that decision and not have time working against you. And in the short term, the state's going to continue to struggle with that, and we will as well.
All right. Other questions?
Yeah.
Right here.
Now, Janet, you've been to like 18 community meetings. You've asked me 1,000 questions. You want to do it again?
Over here, Mr. Mayor.
I mean, we have had a chance to talk publicly a lot of times. Why? We've had it publicly. I'll get yours too. It's okay. Well, we don't have cash spewing out for things that are not working. Well, we have a criminal justice system where we have people with mental illness incarcerated and costing the city and taxpayers an enormous amount of money. Just, you can ask the question. Okay. Just, Janet, ask the question. What is the question? Janet, would you please ask me the question? Thank you. So what's the question? Thank you. That's an excellent question. All right, I'm going to answer it in just a second. What's your question?
Good morning, Mr. Mayor.
I'm going to answer.
My name is Dr. Erica A. Murray, and I'm a member of the FAME board, which governs Audubon Charter School. My concern is the cuts that we have in education, and we're currently facing the MFP funding crisis. And in an attempt for us to have adequate human capital, because we are building strong, how do we find a way or make a way to ensure that when we do pass this on to the next generation, we have competent people that can actually lead with all the work that you're doing today?
Okay, excellent question. I'm going to try to answer two of them, and I think I can do this in 5 minutes. First of all, Janet, and I really mean this in a respectful way, I can explain this to you, but I cannot understand it for you, all right? So I want you to just listen to me. The city of New Orleans, as an entity, has never primarily been responsible for designing and or operating mental health facilities. That is why when you want to engage me in those decisions, I say, go talk to the state. We are the ones that respond to what the state done, and that philosophical fight that you asked me about. Now, if I was standing here as your governor, and I was standing here as a state legislator, what I would tell you is that it is a combination of both. So let me explain, because this is having a direct impact on your pocketbooks. When the federal government does not invest in mental health, and it's their responsibility to do it, and the president tried to do it through the Affordable Care Act, right, and in research and development, Nick, in all of these areas, and they cut funding for the National Institute of Health, they cut funding for mental health, and they try to push that down. And the governor says, I'm not going to play. I'm not interested in taking Medicaid. Everybody else in the world is going to do it. I know it's going to make us $16 billion. I'm going to strangle that as much as I can for whatever reason. His idea is, well, the impact that it has on us is that it closes the New Orleans Adolescent Hospital, which is an inpatient facility for young people. It pushes everything that was going on in there supposedly out into the community, but they don't fund the community centers either. And then they close Southeastern, right, which is across the thing. And then all of a sudden, you have your institutions that are closed, and then you have your outpatient centers that are closed. Now, what pressure that puts on us is that we either have to take up the mantle of becoming the primary financer and caregiver for mental health or not. Now, the federal government then comes down and says, oh, by the way, your jail is out of communion. You got to get it back in communion, and one of the problems is there's no mental health services for the inmates that are in there. Well, it's because there was no mental health from on the outside. Most mental health experts will tell you the last place that you want to have to give mental health services is after somebody crosses through the jail. You want to make sure that all of those services are in the community so that folks don't actually get into jail for circumstances that result from mental health. So the answer is, federal, state, and local, you want a robust system that invests in early mental health, in outpatient, and have the sufficient enough capacity for inpatient when it's necessary. But mental health is a lot like other care as well. We've moved from huge buildings that have inpatient care to mostly outpatient care and to manage a more effective system of it. Suffice it to say, substance abuse in your city, there is a heroin epidemic in your city right now. I don't know if you know this or not, but it's all over America. When everybody started to abuse prescription drugs and the federal government came down on that, that got really expensive. Heroin got really cheap. The number of overdoses that we've had in the city has risen in a frightening way, but it's very consistent with the kinds of things that we saw in the Northeast earlier this year and talking to other mayors and other police chiefs. And substance abuse treatment, mental health treatment, we don't spend enough money on, and it's costing us a lot of money on the back end. As a matter of fact, it's forcing a federal judge to impose upon a city the need to build a brand new facility behind the jail that's going to cost a lot more money than we should. We've spent so much money over in the jail, I can't even spend any time telling you about it today because it's a whole subject for another day, but it's a system that's upside down and broken. It needs to be front-end loaded. It doesn't need to be back-end loaded. The same thing is true about your schools. Now, there is no other city in America. Now, this is a very strong feeling about education. I am a big proponent of the charter school movement in New Orleans. Now, I'm not married to a governance model of charter versus traditional public or the parochial school that tried to teach me how to read and write. That was St. Matthias over on Broad Street. That's now Blessed Trinity. What I am a proponent of giving parents choice, making sure that principals have autonomy, making sure that we hold our children to high standards, and then making sure that they have the resources necessary to do that, and keeping the school board out of the business of hiring and firing at school sites and into the business of just managing broadly the financial mechanisms of the city. Now, that model in your city has produced probably one of the most progressive, best developing school systems in America. We have a long way to go, but this is one thing that you should really be proud of and think about, because that system has got to come back into city control. There's no way for the state to continue to do this ad infinitum. It's got to come back, and my guess is it's going to come back in the next 3 years. You got to get in that fight. You got to make sure that when those schools come back here, that the school board that's in place, the individuals that are elected to run that school board, and the structure that they have to run, and the governance model is exactly right, or we will lose ground on clearly the most significant building block that's going to help New Orleans go forward, because everything's got to go through the schoolhouse door. And so now charter schools have got to act right. There's got to be good management. There's got to be good accountability. And when a charter school doesn't work, we ought to shut it down right away. And there are some public schools, by the way, that are being run by the school board that are doing spectacularly well as well. Essentially, the most important thing, if there was one, I know everybody would say it's public safety, and of course it's hard to say that that's not the most important thing. But once the city is safe and secure, the then most important significant reform that this city will see in our lifetime is the schools, because that's what stops the kids from getting to the place where they have to make a decision between bad and worse, which is, do you want to go to jail, right, or do you want to get hurt? We want people that are happy, that are healthy, that have the opportunities to go on and be givers rather than takers, that are actually making the city stand up and be proud of itself, and not have a city that's afraid. So we have a lot of work to do. We've made a lot of progress. We have a lot to be proud of, but listen, we're not even close. We're not even close to where we need to be, where the hard work's going to stop. We've got to do more, and everybody's got to work harder. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Mayor. I'm afraid that's all the time we have for questions. We could use another hour to ask questions of the mayor. Thanks again to Iberia Bank for their generous sponsorship of this breakfast briefing, and thanks to all of you for being with us this morning. We hope this event has been informative. As a member of BGR, I encourage those of you who are not already BGR members to join us. You'll find details in the brochures at the registration table. See you all at the next event. Thank you so much.